All right, welcome everyone to today's Google Webmaster Central Office Hours Hangouts. My name is John Mueller. I am a Webmaster Trends Analyst here at Google in Switzerland. And part of what I do is do these Office Hours Hangouts with webmasters and publishers like the ones here in the Hangout and the ones that submitted a bunch of questions via the Google Plus thread already. As always, if there's some new folks here in the Hangout that would like to ask the first couple of questions, feel free to jump on in.
Yeah, John. Hi. Actually, I'm getting error in the structured data tools.
OK.
Like we have uploaded the rating actually for each and every merchant, like Coffee Day, something like that. The thing is, I'm getting error in like show a correct like words done best rating. I'm not able to figure it out.
So what kind of error are you getting there?
Uh, words done best rating is not yet enabled.
And you're providing that markup on your pages?
Yeah.
OK. I probably need to look at those pages specifically. So what I'd recommend doing there is posting that maybe in the help forum together with the URL of the page where you're seeing this problem. And there's some folks active in the help forum who are really good with structured data issues who can probably help to narrow it down or to guide it on to one of us to take a look at on our side.
Okay, that's good. And one more. Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
The thing is, we are looking for something like of giving offers for specific merchant wise. Some like we have a schema for restaurants or something like that. In the same way, do we have anything for the specific merchant saying that uh, restaurant, spa, saloon for each and every merchant wise? Can we give offers and deals, something like that? We have a schema or something like that.
I don't
Good
know offhand.
afternoon, speaking.
I'd ask in the
Speaking,
forum there
yeah.
as well.
Oh, hi there. You okay?
Oops. Yeah, so
No problem.
I'd ask in the forum there as well to kind of double check. I'm not sure if we have something specific for that. Sometimes what will be the case is that there's markup available for schema.org, which is kind of like the theoretical basis of the markup that we have. But we don't necessarily use all of schema.org in the search results. So it might be that you could theoretically mark it up, but you might not see any effect of that in the search results, which might help to guide your decision on whether or not you want to actually mark that up or not.
Okay, that's fine. And one more thing, we are uploading the social links in the Google knowledge graph. Actually, it's not visible that it is taking so long to crawl. I don't know what's the reason I got, but we are not able to visible in the knowledge graph. I have seen like 4 or 5. I have worked for 4 or 5 clients, but for all this is happening for all the clients. I am not able to extract what is the issue actually.
So we use a number of factors to determine when we use the structured data markup. On the one hand, it has to be technically correct, which is the testing tool. So that's something you can test with the testing tool fairly quickly. It has to be correct from a policy point of view as well. So that's one thing that you might want to get some tips on from the help forum there as well. And then finally, it has to be such that we can trust this website properly. So that's something that's kind of looking at the quality of the website overall, where we need to really be sure that this is a website that we can trust to provide this markup in a correct way. So that's something that you'd be able to kind of narrow down a little bit once you're sure that the first two elements are really taken care of.
Almost all social links are verified, even though it is taking time. That's why actually I
Yeah,
want to
I think the social links feature in particular takes a bit of time to get picked up and get confirmed. So that's not just a matter of one-time crawling and indexing. That's something that can take a couple of weeks' time to actually be reflected.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Sure. OK, more new questions or questions from new folks to the Hangouts.
Yeah. Hello.
I do have a very specific question, I guess. So with AMP being in all around the world in all mouths right now, my question is if it already affects Google rankings and the organic rankings, because a few weeks ago you said that it's not affecting the rankings, but well, it could be, because of course the total the user feeling is better with AMP, of course. But for example, I implemented AMP on an e-commerce store like 4 days ago, and already 2 days later, when Google had it already in the CDN saved, I saw some increases just on mobile. So my question is if it's already a ranking factor or if it's well, a coincidence.
That sounds more like a coincidence. So from as far as I know, it's not a ranking factor, and I don't know what the plans are there with regards to making it a ranking factor or not. To some extent, it might be that we would just keep it as a normal type of page that we also index. So I don't think anything that you'd be seeing that quickly or at the moment there would be a result of the AMP change.
Mm-hmm. Okay, then one more question regarding AMP. Is it possible to see more directly all pages that are indexed by AMP? Because in the search console, you see the number of pages that are indexed, and you see only the number of pages with the names of the pages which have errors, so didn't get indexed. So my question is there a possibility like a Google query to make like site your domain question mark AMP is one, for example, to check if it's indexed or not yet?
I don't think you can look that up. So like you mentioned, in Search Console, we only have a list of the pages that are bad, which isn't what you're looking for. And we have the total count that is indexed, but we don't have a list of the pages that are indexed. And we don't have the same for normal index pages either, primarily because a site can have a lot of index pages, and it's unclear to us, at least from this point, what the usefulness is of you having a list of the index pages. Maybe there's something that we're missing where you're saying, well, this is really important for me because of X, Y, and Z. And if that's the case, it would be great to better understand what you're trying to do with the URLs that are indexed.
OK, yeah, it's actually just for knowing which pages are in index. But of course, if you don't have 10,000 of pages, you can look it up manually if it's already in the CDN of the AMP project. But yeah, I guess this is right now the only way. But I also tried to make it with site cdn.amp project, but no chance to get the number.
I don't think it would work that way. Yeah. That's kind of tricky. What you might be able to do is look at your server logs to see the traffic going to the AMP pages, which is, of course, kind of reflecting the traffic that's going to the CDN version of the AMP pages. But that would give you an idea is this URL being shown at all in search or not?
Yeah. OK, thanks a lot. If I just could ask another question,
sure,
because it's I read it on the webmaster on the blog, on the hangout blog. Somebody was asking, and of course, I guess everybody in here has the same question. With now Google Penguin being real time, how long usually it would be after Google crawling a new link, for example, to your page? How we wrote it in the comment, if the New York Times places a very natural link to your site, which is really good, because they say, OK, you're the best startup in the world, so here's my link, and I tell everybody, the whole world, check out this page. So how long would it take for Google now, with Penguin being live, real time? So I guess it's different, real time or live, to adopt it to the rankings. So for example, if New York Times says, OK, this is the best time if you Google for your name, that the rankings will be better?
I can't give you a definitive answer for that, but as far as I know, that's almost immediate. So when we see that link, when we notice that there's something new on those pages pointing to the URL that we know about or that we don't know about, then we generally pick that up almost immediately. So this is something that you can kind of see when it's like a really new business or a new website, you see that jump from being indexed to not being indexed due to a link like that fairly quickly. And we try to pick that up as quickly as possible, because sometimes there are effects that are very time sensitive that we need to reflect in our search results as well. When everyone is talking about this business that's doing something really fantastic, then we need to know about that and need to take that into account when it comes to rankings.
Okay, yeah, thanks a lot. So what is the same, if I just can finish this question, is like if you get a lot of bad links, let's not really talk about negative SEO, but kinda. For example, if somebody says, "No, okay, well, Google already said negative SEO isn't a big factor to be worried of with Penguin Live, but I guess it has to take part, maybe not in Penguin, but in another part of the algorithms as well, that if you receive a lot of bad links, not only for manual actions of Google, which of course I guess will be a bit faster now, but the other things, how is Google reacting to bad links?
So I'd say even before the Penguin update there, that's something that we're able to take into account really well. So every now and then, I would take cases where I hear about this kind of thing happening to the engineering teams and say, hey, it looks like there's this big negative SEO campaign going on here. Can you double check to see that this is working as expected on our side? And in pretty much all of the cases, I think maybe even in all of the cases, or I don't know, maybe one or two cases where it wasn't the case, the team was able to say, well, this is working as expected. These problematic links aren't causing a problem. So even before this Penguin update, that was something where when you look at the details, it's pretty much working out already.
Mm-hmm.
Across cases where you think, oh, it looks like some negative SEO is happening here, and this might be affecting my client's or my friend's website, then I'd love to look into those cases and see what's actually happening there. But just in general, if you're worried about this, then usually this is something that we're able to handle very, very well, and something that we have a lot of practice with. It's not something that people just start doing now, or that they just started doing a couple of years ago. They've been doing this kind of stuff for a really long time now.
Mm-hmm. OK, thanks a lot.
John, regarding what you said earlier with link effects and how time until you take them into account, I guess you're referring more about indexation, but not necessarily what value or effects should that have on certain rankings, which may take longer to process, just as you do with content. For example, when you see a new page and you index it, but you're not exactly sure whether it should rank, and that may take some time until it ranks where it should actually rank.
Yeah, I mean, there are a number of signals that come together. But for the most part, we should be able to pick these things up fairly quickly.
John, has since Penguin 4 come out, or perhaps shortly before, are you kind of implying that Google is now actually indexing or crawling things faster than it was before? Is that kind of an automatic thing that you've had to implement as a result of real-time Penguin?
I wouldn't say that. I mean, obviously, we always work on crawling faster. So I'm pretty sure we'd be crawling faster this week than we would maybe a month ago. But just specific to this algorithm, I don't think that would affect the crawling of pages.
It was just whether or not, as part of probably the very huge piece of work you had to do for Penguin 4, whether or not you did actually have to implement anything that meant that there would be a higher rate of crawling, simply so you had more information available to you. But I don't know, maybe not.
I think we have to do that anyway.
OK.
Like there's always so much more happening on the web from one day to the next that keeping up is hard. And making sure that you're really on top of things and not just chasing the tail is really hard too. So that's kind of something that our engineers always have to fight with.
So the New York Times example, I mean, presumably that's obviously a relatively high authority site in Google's eyes, and so many pages from that will be crawled pretty regularly anyway. But in terms of looking at it from the opposite side of stuff, many of those spammy type sites, which might not necessarily get crawled that often, presumably for Penguin to apply in those sentences, then you again would have to wait for that site or those pages to be crawled before the links in those pages would then be followed and any appropriate kind of Penguin action taken or not taken.
Yeah, so I guess in a lot of cases, what will happen when it comes to spammy links? Like if we're just looking at spammy links in general, then what happens there is if this website is kind of a low quality site that we don't really care about, then we're not going to value that much anyway. So crawling faster isn't really something that we think makes sense there. It's not going to have a big effect anyway.
In the very short term, though, because I think Gary mentioned that Penguin 3 is in the middle of being removed or will be over the next few days, I think presumably there's still a situation at the moment where sites have had some kind of negative effect due to spam links, and they are in the middle of being removed. Is that correct? And so do you need to recrawl those spammy sites before that element of Penguin 3 can be removed, or do you already have the information that you kind of need to be able to do that very quickly?
We probably already have that, but I think like the whole rollout and kind of the intermittent period is something that is kind of temporary anyway. But I wouldn't really worry about that. It's usually more a matter of us getting everything to the infrastructure than a matter of recrawling the whole web again.
Okay, and so this intermediary period, again, this P3 being removed, ready for P4 to come in, is that? Do you have any estimates of how long that might take before you kind of reach that steady state? I appreciate that things will change all the time anyway because P4 is permanently, checking things. But do you have an idea of when people might expect the kind of today's snapshot to be kind of correctly in place?
I don't know. I don't have any fixed time on that.
Okay, but it's not finished yet, presumably.
I don't know.
Okay, understood. Understood.
I mean that. There are a lot of moving parts, and we have a lot of data centers, and all of this needs to roll out. So that's something that just sometimes takes quite a bit of time. Some of these data centers might be in maintenance at the moment, and there's a lot of shuffling that always happens there. So that's really hard to say without looking at the specifics of where exactly everything is and which data is where, which algorithms, which code is where. That's not always that true.
So,
hey, John, may I ask 2 questions too, please?
All right, go for it.
Okay, very quite simple, so I probably be short answers. First one is about 301 redirect. I have one redirect from non-www to www, and the other one is from HTTP to HTTPS. So, and there may be, again, redirects from a specific page to another specific page. So there may be 3 redirects in a row, one going from non-www to www, then going to HTTPS, then eventually the final real redirect. Is there a problem with that? I think not, because I thought there has to be less than 5. Or is there any more optimal way to do it?
I mean, ideally, you would always redirect from the original page to the final destination directly. But if you need to do it like this, I don't see any problems.
Yeah, normally I would do it like that. But for example, if you offer to the one going from non-www to www would be in place, and then again from HTTP to HTTPS, because I can't really do it in one redirect.
Yeah, sure.
So
I
that's
wouldn't
okay.
really worry about that. Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, and the second question is kind of related about what you discussed earlier. Incoming links. Normally, for a normal site, which you haven't done anything spammy or anything like that, bad links, SEO agency or anything like that. So they are more or less natural links, with a risk that someone did some negative SEO against you, but unlikely. Do you really have to check all those links, disavow them, or everything like that, or you can just go on the idea that what you haven't done, what it's not on your site, can't really affect you, and don't waste your time with checking all this and just let Google handle it? So you really need for
Yeah.
a normal site to use the Disavow options, or is more like for advanced people who do advanced SEO tactics and eventually did spammy things in the past?
Yeah. So I'd say the largest majority of the websites don't need to do anything with the disavow, because like you said, we're able to pick up the normal issues anyway, and we can take care of that. And if you do know that your SEO in the past has done some shady things with links, or previous SEO, or someone else, then of course doing the disavow is a good way to kind of make sure you can sleep at night and don't have to worry that Google is maybe interpreting those links in a way that you didn't want them.
But not for a typical site. So not something like someone with a blog links to you from a blog roll with 100 another people, something like that.
Yeah, I mean the normal small business website out there, they don't need to do anything with the disavow tool. That's also why the tool isn't tied in with the rest of Search Console. It's kind of a separate tool on its own. It's really something that you only really need to do if you're aware of issues around links to your site.
I see. Thank you a lot. I have a few more questions, but I posted them in the YouTube, so I won't ask here. I will let you eventually read and answer to them, and if there is anything, I will follow up at that moment, OK?
All right, great. With
OK,
that,
thank you a lot.
Thank you. So let me take some of the questions that were submitted, and then we can open it up for more discussions from you all. I'm vaguely taking these by the plus ones that they got. So in the future, if you see questions that are submitted on the Google Plus thread that you like, make sure to hit the +1 button there. We did some A/B testing with our content and noticed changes in our traffic when the content is moved from right to left columns to the main section, and the opposite. Does Google treat the right or left columns differently than the main content? So I guess, oops, let me just mute you for a moment. So it's not completely clear to me what you mean with the right and left columns. But if something is, for example, in what we call the boilerplate, which is the navigation on the top or on the sides or in the footer, then that's something that we would generally treat as being not a part of the primary content. On the other hand, if it's in the middle, if it's a part of the primary content, then we would try to see that as a part of the main part of the page and treat that appropriately. And finally, if you have your content in different columns, then that's usually not something I'd really worry about, because then we would see this whole set of different columns or the table or whatever you have there as the primary content. So on from the primary content to the boilerplate, which is kind of repeated across the site, then you might see changes there. If you're just moving things around within the primary content, then any changes that you would see in search sound more like a coincidence to me. OK, now that Penguin runs real time, would we be correct in thinking that if we found a few bad links on our site and disavowed them, we should see any rankings benefit relatively quickly? Also, does Penguin now just devalue those low-quality links as opposed to punish you for them? So I guess first thing to keep in mind is that Penguin is a web spam algorithm in general. It's not just specific to links. We look at web spam overall. So we try to figure out what we need to do when it comes to web spam there. And if these are problematic links that are affected here, and you use a disavow file, then that's a good way for us to pick that up and to recognize, OK, this link is something you don't want to have associated with your site, so that when we recrawl that page that's linking to you, we can drop that link from essentially our link graph internally. With regards to devaluing those low-quality links as opposed to punishing you for them, in general, we try to figure out what kind of spammy tactics are happening here. And we say, well, we just will try to ignore this part with regards to your website.
John, just on that subject, people are talking about, just given that there's this devalue versus demote thing that seems to be happening now a bit more. People are kind of talking about just ditching their disavow files completely, and as in if they're not at risk of manual action, they're saying, well, hang on a minute. If Google's going to simply devalue rather than demote, why don't we just get rid of it completely? I mean, what would your response be to that?
That sounds like a particularly bad strategy. So if this is something that you really don't want to have associated with your website, then you should keep that in your disavow file. So that's not something where I'd say for this one specific algorithm, Google is able to kind of devalue those and handle them on our own. Therefore, I won't tell Google anything about the problematic links that I found. I think that's a bad idea. So I'd keep the disavow file. I'd use the disavow file for any links that you really don't want to be associated with. And then you're sure that they're not taken into account across the board.
So perhaps there's the option of people who have been overly cautious. There's the option of perhaps scaling that back a bit, but anything that's in there that really should be in there, keep it? Or would you say basically if you've already put your disavow file in there, the fact that we're now devaluing rather than demoting, don't change it, keep it as it was before?
I personally just keep it the way it is before.
Okay.
I mean, I know there's some sites that have gone in and said, OK, we'll just disavow everything that's been linking to us. And that was probably a bad strategy before, and is just as bad strategy now. That's something you might want to clean up. But in general, if you're using the disavow file for what it was meant to be used, I would continue to use it like that.
OK, thanks.
OK, you state that affiliate sites need to add value compared to my competitors who are also affiliates. I've previously added a lot of good content, but you still favor them in terms of rankings. If I was to add lots of additional content to my categories along with FAQs and other useful information, could that be enough for you? Or is it possible that I do all of this and nothing happens? Yes, it's always possible that you add a lot of content and that it's not picked up by your search engine. So that's something where there is no immediate one-to-one relationship with regards to what you put on your site and how that ranks immediately afterwards in the search results. So this is something where over time you will see some sort of direct effects with regards to how Google looks at your website and views it with regards to, is this quality content or not? But you'll also see an indirect effect with regards to how people react to that content. Do they recommend it to other people? And if so, that's something we could pick up as well. So just by adding text to your pages, just by making sure that text is unique, for example, or by combining things into FAQs, that doesn't mean that your website is suddenly high quality and something that we should be ranking higher. So this is something more of, I'd say, a long-term process where you have to keep working at it and keep making sure that your website is really the best website of its kind, not essentially the same as all of these other affiliates, just with a little bit more text. How fast can we see an influence in the search results of a new good link, maybe from New York Times, now that Penguin is working real time? So as I mentioned before, this is something that's really fast in general. When we type our company name into the search results, we don't see the Google Plus page appear on the right-hand side of the page. However, I've noticed this happens with a lot of competitors. What and why is this happening? What can we do to get this to happen? Everything on our site is marked up correctly, along with our site being linked to our Google for Business page. So one of the things that you could be doing, I don't know if this is the case there, but you can mark up the social profiles that you have on your page as well, on your home page, for example, which tells us a bit more about which of these profiles actually need to be associated with your search results and shown in the search results in the knowledge graph in the sidebar there. But we don't guarantee that we always show these social profiles. So just because it's marked up correctly doesn't guarantee that it'll be shown in the knowledge graph as well. One thing you could do, if you wanted a little bit more information on this, is maybe post in our Webmaster Help Forum to maybe have someone take a look at that briefly and see, are you doing everything correctly? Is there maybe something on Google's side that's not working as it should be? And if so, usually they'll be able to escalate that to one of us as well. My pages open really fast, less than 1 second, but sometimes it takes more than 10 seconds to be loaded completely due to external JavaScript files, like widgets and various things. So the browser loading indicator spins for like 10+ seconds while everything is loading. Is this a problem? So one of the things that might be problematic there is with regards to us rendering those pages. So we will try to render the pages when we see pages that use JavaScript like this. And if we can't render those pages properly within a reasonable time, then we might fall back to the HTML version of the page and just use that. So if this is just a matter of various social media widgets that are taking a while to load, then maybe that's less of a problem. But if it's a matter of us actually showing the right content, if you need to call external APIs to pull in content or to show a map, and that map has that additional information that you need to have indexed, then that might be something you'd want to clean up. Additionally, keep in mind that users don't really care which widgets or which parts of the page are taking long to be loaded. So just because it's a widget from some social media company doesn't really mean that the user is happy waiting for all of that to load. So that's another aspect to kind of keep in mind, in that if you're slowing the user down, then chances are they'll be going somewhere else, or they won't be spending that much time on your website. Let's see. I have a question regarding schema.org markup. We're seeing a spike in schema.org errors on our site due to a missing home location. But there's not an official word about any changes to requirements for markup for persons. Can you shed some light on this? So this is something that I believe came up last week or maybe a bit beforehand. And I looked into this with the team, and it looks like we were looking for some additional markup on some of these pages. But that's not necessarily something you need to worry about there. So in general, I think the person markup, that doesn't need the home location. When a specific country is targeted in Search Console, will Google show the results only in that country or also in countries where that language is spoken? How does that work? Can you clarify a bit? So the country setting in Search Console is for geo-targeting, which means we will try to show that search result a bit higher in search results within that country, so from users from that country, when we think that the user is looking for something local. So if you're looking for something local and you're searching in that country, then chances are your site will be a bit higher there. On the other hand, if you're looking for something that's not local and you're searching in that country, then maybe not much will happen. If you're searching in a different country, then your page will rank just normally there. So it's not that it will be demoted in search results in other countries. It'll just be promoted slightly for users in that specific country. With regards to languages, the geo-targeting setting doesn't affect languages at all. That's completely parallel to the languages. If you do have different language versions of your site or of your content in general, then you can use something like the hreflang markup to let us know about the connection between the different language versions. And the hreflang markup doesn't affect rankings at all, but it makes sure that the most appropriate version of your page is actually the one that's shown in search. So it'll essentially swap things out to bring the right language or the right country language version in the search results for that user. Should I add structured data markup to lists of products? I'm adding it to individual product landing pages, but I've also got category pages that list several products. And I'm unsure to add markup to those lists as well as to the individual product pages. So in general, the structured data markup should be specific to the one main item on the page. So if you have a list of different items, then the structured data markup wouldn't apply to that. So you shouldn't just mark up one of those items in the list, or you shouldn't use aggregate ratings, for example, across all of the products in that list. You should probably just not use the structured data markup on a list of different items. For individual products, of course, that probably makes more sense. What's the proper way to migrate from HTTP to HTTPS? And can you give us a step-by-step? Is it like a normal site migration, or are there additional things to be done? So for the most part, it's just a normal site migration in that first you need to make sure that your HTTPS site actually works, and then you set up all of the redirects that we have listed in the Help Center. I think we also have a Help Center topic specifically for HTTPS migration, so I take a look at that. There are also some really neat checklists that are going around with regards to HTTPS migrations, which might make it a little bit easier for you to kind of check things off as you're moving along. OK, this is a geo-specific inventory problem. When a user enters our inventory pages, they're dynamically served inventory based on their IP. This ensures that someone wanting to buy a car in California sees California search results. However, we've noticed that the wrong cities seem to rank in the Google search results. In the example linked, you will see that our Pittsburgh page is ranking for a generic term, where Google picked up my IP and served me California-specific results. In a perfect world, they would also serve our California page. I'm not sure why this is happening. Goes on a little bit and has some links. I didn't check the links, but in general, this is sometimes a really tricky problem. So this is something where I don't think there's one trivial answer that works for everything. But in practice, what happens is we try to index one set of content for each URL. And since we primarily crawl from California, that's probably the content that you would see there. So if you serve something specific to users in California or to users in the US, then that's probably what we would pick up for indexing and what we would use for ranking them, because that's the version that we have indexed. So if you need to have different versions of the content indexed, you'd need to make sure that there are separate URLs for each of those different versions so that we can specifically index that content individually. So in this case, maybe I don't know, a URL specifically for Pittsburgh, if that's like a good or a big source of users for your website, or specific URL for California or for other states or other countries, where when we crawl that URL, we can actually pick up the content on that URL, and we're not redirected or served kind of local specific content again.
John, to add to that, so there are city and state specific URLs that exist to Google, and they're crawling them. It's just they're not indexing them and showing them for those local search results.
OK. If they're not being indexed, then that sounds more like a technical issue, where maybe there's something on those pages that is blocking us from indexing them, or a rel canonical on those pages that's telling us to go kind of look at the more generic version. Or what might also be happening is that our systems have checked a bunch of these pages and found exactly the same content. So if you have, for example, separate pages for every city in California, but you actually show the same results for all of these, then our algorithms might learn and say, well, this URL pattern matches California, and I can just kind of cut off the city version and just index the primary version instead. So that's something that might be happening there too. Some of that you can double check by looking at which URL is actually indexed in the search results. So if you do an info query for that specific URL, if you see a different URL being shown in the search results, then chances are we at least equate those URLs and say, well, for us, these are equivalent enough that we would focus on one URL here, maybe the state version or more generic version, compared to this individual URL that you gave us there. And like I mentioned, this can be really tricky depending on how you have this set up, how much different content you actually provide on those pages. It's easy to do something really fancy for users, but that's something that sometimes causes a bit of trouble for the search engines. So sometimes it makes sense to kind of take that setup that you have and also talk with other webmasters about that, maybe in a help forum, where they can give you some tips on what you need to kind of shy away from and avoid, so that you don't run into maybe the more doorway page situation, or that you don't run into a situation where a lot of your pages are essentially empty search results pages, which we also try to filter out.
OK, thanks.
All right, let's say a user clicks on my page in the search results and doesn't find what he was looking for and goes back to the results and clicks on other results. Is this a direct low-quality signal for my site, or more of an indirect one that a user might not recommend my site in the future? For us, this is more something where we suspect users will kind of keep that in mind in the future, and we can pick that up more as an indirect signal, if at all. Because sometimes it does make sense that people just visit your site very briefly. If they can get the information they're looking for very briefly, then that's perfectly fine. That's not something where I'd say this is a problem that you need to fix. But it really depends on your website. And that's something that you can notice yourself in analytics. If you look at your website there, you can see which pages are people spending a lot of time on, which pages are people kind of bouncing away from. And then looking at those pages specifically, you might be able to say, oh, it's normal that people bounce from this type of page because they can get this information very quickly, whereas it would be abnormal if people just bounce from this type of page because there's actually a lot of in-depth content that they might be interested in and should be actually looking into before bouncing away. How would user react to a piece of content if he found it useful and high quality? How could Google pick up the usefulness of that specific content? Please don't mention 23 questions. Yeah, now that you mentioned that blog post with the 23 questions, that's actually a pretty good approach of looking at it there. So that's ideally, this is something that you look at with your users directly, where you do maybe a user study, where you find people who aren't associated with your site to try to complete some tasks on your website, try to complete the same tasks on competing websites, and try to get their honest feedback, as honest as possible. Maybe you can video record them or kind of see what they're doing on your site, where you can see, oh, people are getting confused with this type of page, or they're actually finding this type of feature within my website really useful, and I'm not highlighting it enough in my pages. So these are things where user studies can open up a lot of really interesting insights. And that's something that we do a lot as well. So even with all of our algorithms and all of our engineers, we can't blindly assume that people will just do whatever we show them on our pages. We have to test that regularly. We do user studies. We invite people over to our offices to see how they engage with our products, with our mockups, and to try to figure out where are people getting stuck, where are people getting confused, where do people maybe lose trust in what we provide there, and try to pick that content up and use that to improve those pages. I understand that in order to rank, you need to rewrite relevant, useful content about the subject or service that you're trying to rank for. What about other tips? On-site SEO, can you give with regards to getting a page to rank well? That may have changed over the few years. So I guess, first of all, I would question an assumption that you need to rewrite existing content, because just rewriting existing content doesn't make it unique and valuable. So the words might be different. The order of the words might be different. But just because of that doesn't mean that this is really something unique and compelling and high quality that we'd want to show users. So that's kind of like start off with, don't just rewrite your content and assume that a slightly different spin on something that's already been said 1,000 times will automatically rank in the search results, because chances are it won't just rank in the search results like that. So really kind of taking a step and working on what you can do to make sure that your site is the best site of its kind there is something that I'd recommend. And there's no single formula to getting a site there.
John, are you going to open this up to people here in the Hangout again?
All right, go for it. You get to start.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that. So we have had this problem with our site where Google has marked our site, this site may have been hacked or may be hacked, and it's been doing that since June. Apparently the search result that is being shown was an error page that we had back in June. We had a brief outage when Google was crawling, and Google somehow has decided that this is our homepage now, and we can't get it to get a new version of the homepage. Anything we do has not been successful. I think you've been maybe looking at this with some engineers, and I was just wondering if there's anything we can do at this point. It's really hurting our business, and it's really frustrating, and I just don't even know what to do at this point.
You posted in the Google Plus thread, right?
Yeah, and I've been on the product forums for several months now and gotten some help from different people. We've tried a bunch of different things, and just nothing we do seems to make that old version get replaced with our new version, which doesn't have the problems that we're seeing back in June.
Okay. I'll double check with the team on what's actually happening there, because I know I've been following up with them when you posted, I think last week, something like that.
It's been several weeks. Yeah, it's been escalated for a while now, and that's why I'm here, just to try to see if there's anything new that you've heard or anything else, any other channels we can go down to figure out what's going on here. We've really combed through our code. We don't see any problems. We've had other people comb through it, and we just don't see the issue anymore. So
okay, I'll double check later today what's actually happening there.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
John, I have a follow-up on what you said too.
Okay.
You said we shouldn't rewrite content. And I totally agree with this up to a point. But one thing I was doing on one of my sites is that I translate content from English in my native language. The content doesn't exist in my native language. The translation is not automated or anything like that. It's done humanly. I add my insights. I didn't translate phrase by phrase. I add things, I cut things. But essentially, it's basically the same content, just in different language and with some additions. Is that okay or not, or borderline?
That's fantastic.
Okay, thank you.
No, especially if this is content that's not available in your language, I think that's totally fine. That's a great way to do this. Problematic for us is when it's like automatically translated, or when you run it through a spinner software and it just swaps out synonyms, and a normal person, when they read it, they can't even read it. So that's the type of thing that would be problematic. But where you're taking content, where you're translating it, where you're providing insights of your own, I think that's a really good approach there. Obviously, if you're taking copyrighted content, then there might be some legal issues that you need to watch out for. I don't know how that is actually with regards to translations. But
I always original site and everything like that. So I done it in a transparent way, not claiming it's my content or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, if it's your own content, then I think that's perfect. It's something where we regularly see the situation that people searching in their own language have trouble finding useful content because it's just not available in their language. So if you can make sure that your content is available in those languages, that's fantastic.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, John. I have a question actually.
Okay.
The thing is, we have each and every city specific home pages. The thing is, I want to kill my home page and I want to redirect. Suppose they are coming to San Francisco, something, Chicago, something like that. I want to redirect a home .com page to the respect to city page. Is there any problem, SEO issues in that actually?
What can happen is that we would drop your homepage from the search results in a case like that, which might be what you're trying to do. But if people, for example, are searching for your business directly, then they might land on one of these city pages instead of the homepage. If you're doing this on a per country basis or with different language versions, you can also do that with the hreflang markup to some extent. There's a blog post we did maybe mid last year. It's called something like finding the best homepage for your website or something like that, where we talk about different strategies that you can do if you have a homepage that automatically redirects or automatically swaps out content based on the user's location.
Okay. But now thing what happened is our city pages are not at all ranking. Instead of that, our .com page is ranking. That's it. Our city pages are the main pages where the user is choosing the right content according to their respective city. Actually, that will be the main user get the right content actually. But .com page, if you share the same content in the .com page also, the thing is it will be getting duplicated. That's what I thought actually. So I have suggested the same thing.
Yeah, it's hard to say without looking at the specifics. So that sounds like something where you'd probably need to post the details in the Webmaster Help Forum, so that some of the folks there can give you some more specific advice there. I know there's some situations where it does make sense for us to kind of focus on the homepage. In some situations where doing this kind of geo-specific redirect makes sense. But you need to keep in mind that Googlebot primarily crawls from the US and from, I don't know, California, or depending on how the IP database is looking at that. So what might be happening then, if you always just redirect the homepage, is that we always see that redirect for US users, which might not be your preferred homepage, actually. So that's something that's sometimes tricky to kind of watch out for. But again, in the Webmaster Help Forum, people there can point you in a general direction of what you need to watch out for and what options might make sense there with regards to Google.
And what is the better way to signify Google that this is my right homepage? Should not index some other page. So suppose there is a .com page /Delhi and a /restaurants in Delhi actually. But for small keyword also, that restaurants in Delhi page is ranking. But I don't want that restaurant page to rank. I want the Delhi city page to rank.
So in a case like that, the rel canonical is probably the right tool. But what would happen there is then that detail page doesn't show up at all in the search results. So we would forward everything to the canonical that you specify on that page, and we wouldn't be ranking that specific restaurant, for example, in a case like that. So I don't know if that makes sense in your case. Maybe it does. Maybe it doesn't make that much sense. That's something where probably it helps to get some additional tips.
Actually, we wanted both pages. One will be like a restaurant deals in Delhi, and other will be like restaurants in Delhi.
Yeah,
we want to segregate it separately.
If you want them indexed separately, then they will be ranked separately, and you can't give us like information, say, I want both of these indexed, but actually this one is better. You should like point at this one. And so that's not something that you can really kind of define as a meta tag, for example. We'll try to pick that up based on the context of those pages, maybe the internal links on your site that you have there, to try to understand which of these pages makes more sense to rank for that specific query that's happening there now. But you can't say, both of these pages are great, but this one is for this keyword and this one is for a different keyword.
May I please ask just one more question?
Sure, go for it.
It was one of those I posted in the thread, but since you didn't get to it, I will try to force you to give me an answer. Okay, so the problem is like that. On my personal site this time, it was a blog. I had a couple of variations over time. I had it at some point at mysite.com. At another point, I had it on mysite.ro. At another point, I had it on mysite.com/blog. At another point, I had it on a subdomain blog.mysite.com. So over time, it changed place, and I know that bad, but it's already done. It's not something I can change. So my problem now is like that. I have it at this moment on mysite.com. I have all the other all the addresses redirected, wide redirected. So any URL on that variations redirect to the main page on the new one. Is there any better way to do it to conserve some of link juice from the old options? Because on some of them I have quite a lot of links, and from reputable sites, for example, I worked in the academic medium at some point, and I have links from some universities, from academy in my country.
Yeah. Let me take a look at the comment that you posted, and I'll add a reply there, because I need to head out. Time passes so quickly. OK. So thank you all for joining. Thanks for all the questions that were submitted. I'll try to see what I can do with the remaining ones. We also have one scheduled for Friday, I think. So if the Friday time works for you, feel free to also copy that over.
Thank you for being here for us.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to thank you all for joining, and hopefully I'll see you again in the future. Bye, everyone.